Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Tom Friedman wrote an exceptional op-ed piece this week. Beyond the insights and warnings of Friedman, I was especially excited because Friedman quotes and seems to be influenced by the work and the thought of a thinker, philosopher, teacher and a teacher of mine, Moshe Halbertal. I've had the great zechut, the great privilege of knowing Halbertal and having had conversations with him and having sat through his lectures. He's truly an extraordinary mind. He was described by the Jerusalem Report as an Alui, and that is an enlightened one and considered to be one of the great Jewish scholars and minds of our time. What I'm going to say right now doesn't do justice to Friedman, but I highly, highly recommend that you read it. The title of the op-ed piece is Beirut's Blast is a Warning for America. A part of me would simply want to read it just as he wrote it in its entirety, but I trust that you can Google it and that you'll read it yourself. Friedman points out this: everything has become political in our country and in our world. And like the Sunnis and Shiites, we in America have become so partisan that it's very hard to find middle ground. Even energy, Friedman points out, has become partisan. Coal, oil, gas, they've become Republican. Wind, solar, hydro, they become Democratic. Masks, those things that protect all of us from virus, have become political, and that then becomes absurd. It is dangerous. The result is that there's no longer any productive dialogue, no capacity for disagreement, and we find ourselves like Beirut and other nations of the Mideast, always on the verge of something breaking out, some violence taking place. In the past, I've spoken to you about a concept that was taught by the philosopher and journalist Hannah Arendt. The notion is the banality of evil. And specifically, it's been used in relation to the fact that in the face of evil, people who do nothing are part of the evil. That is the banality of evil. But this past week, I heard an interview with Terry Gross, a University of Virginia philosophy professor who actually majors in the work of Hannah Arendt. And she said something very different about the banality of evil. What she says that a culture which doesn't allow for political conversation, open discussion, and a culture where there's no tolerance for another's opinion, but the other is attacked, that is the banality of evil. And so what Friedman and Halbertal lament is that there's no longer anyone leading us who can bring us together as a people. If only we had a leader who did that, if only. We need somebody who can articulate common values and speak with dignity and with respect. Friedman wrote the following: America is becoming much like a Mid-Eastern country. While Lebanon was concluding that the explosion was an accident, our president was talking like a Beirut militia leader, declaring that it must have been a conspiracy. It was an attack, he said, even though none of his generals said that. In fact, no American general said anything like that. But a society, and certainly a democracy, will eventually die when everything becomes political. Truth in government will get strangled in it. Halbertal continues. He wrote, for healthy politics to flourish, it needs reference points outside of itself, reference points of truth, and the conception of the common good. When everything is political, that is the end of politics. To put it differently, when everything is politics, everything is just about power. There's no center, there are only sides, extreme sides. There's no truth. There's only versions of the truth. There are no facts, only a contest of wills. If you believe that climate change is real, then it must be because someone had paid you off with a research grant. It goes. Illiberal populists have grown in number around the world, and they hold something in common. They deliberately try to undermine the guardians of truth, facts, and the common good. It's rule or die. It's not about everyone. It's about the leader. It's about his power. Halbertal said the following: We need leaders who believe that there's a realm of the sacred. The sacred is the common good. It's outside of politics and who makes big decisions based on best judgments of the common good. It's not about naked power interests. When you lose the realm of the sacred, that realm of the common good outside of politics, it's then that your community, your culture, your society collapses. That's what happened in Lebanon. That's what happened in Yemen. That's what happened in Libya and Iraq. And he fears that slowly happening to both Israel and America. Reversing that trend may be the most important project of our generation. In this week's Parsha, in Parashat Rabbi, we read a verse that reads like this: "You shall not act at all as we now act here, every man as he pleases." Later in the Parsha, we see the Torah has an insistence on social responsibility. It's not just alluded to, it's explicitly commanded. And there seems to be a realization in the Parsha of the following. That is, if we don't take care of one another, if we don't take care of the weakest amongst us, if we don't take care of the hungry and the powerless, it's not just they who suffer, but society will collapse. The Torah creates a worldview. It begins with the fact that the commandments are not given to individuals, but it's given to the entire people. The individual has responsibility. The responsibility is for the self, but it's for everyone. We have a tradition that's built on this sense that we are responsible for the common good. And that means our concerns are about responsibilities that will keep our country, our culture, and our world in balance. Simply put, we don't foul our water or our air because other people drink it and other people breathe it. We don't disadvantage the minorities or the poor. It's not just because of our concern for them and their pain, and it is partially that, but it's because of the stability of the society we want to build. And I think the warnings and predictions of curses and blessings that we read here at the end of Devarim are very, very important because it comes together that we don't live alone. We live amongst others, not only our own people, but neighbors and strangers. And so we need great leaders who reflect the needs of the common good. And perhaps that's why the Torah commands us to have leaders whose power is limited. Sitting next to the king, there was to be a scroll of the law that he had to read, knowing that he couldn't do anything he wanted or control everything he wanted. There was a limitation on the number of horses that he had or the amount of gold and silver that he could obtain. He is to establish an economically just system for the rich and the poor. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote, "The message of the Hebrew Bible is that serving God and serving our fellow human beings are inseparably linked. We're obligated not just to worry for ourselves, but to do our part in improving society and working to create a world in which there shall be no needy among you. We're responsible for the common good." Many of you remember the words of JFK in his inaugural address. And if you don't remember hearing them, you certainly have heard them over the years as they've been repeated so often. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And that's true for every person. It's true for the working person. It's true for managers. It's true for bosses. It's true for the poor, and it's true for the wealthiest among us. If we don't have a sense of the common good, we will sink. But if we have, then a new light will come to the world that speaks on behalf of what's best for America and the world. It will move us on the path of becoming a redeemed nation. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Okay.